Hello, horror fans, and welcome to episode 61 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week's guest is writer-artist Denis St. He has a collection of assorted spooky stories available now called The Land of Many Monsters and Many More Monster Tales. It features creatures, I just realized what I said there, of all shapes and sizes, including fishmen, werewolves, and dinosaurs. It was really fun talking to Denis, because you can tell he loves what he's doing. It shows on the page, too. Denis can be found online at his official website, DenisComics.com. That's one S in Denis, and comics is spelled with an X. On Twitter, at DenisComics. On Instagram, at Denis St Comics. And on Patreon, at patreon.com/DenisStJohn. The Land of Many Monsters is available on Amazon right now. As a quick reminder, if you make horror comics like Denis, I want to talk to you on the show. It doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you're a seasoned pro. Hit me up via email at jferguson@horrortalk.com or on Twitter at jamesferguson. With housekeeping out of the way, let's dive into episode 61 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Denis St. To start off, what I want to do is just, if you had to describe the Land of Many Monsters to someone, whether it's a convention floor, some random person at a party, how would you pitch the book to them?
Well, first, I would probably ask them if they have a heart condition, if they're easily frightened, if they suffer from night terrors, this is not the book for them. And then I'd say it's a one-man horror story collection, much in the vein of EC or Warren Comics, like Tales from the Crypt or Creepy and Eerie, except it's all me, but it's a variety of stories, but mainly about monsters. And this collection kind of hits my version of many of the monster classics. So I have like a Gillman, werewolves and Frankensteins and dinosaurs galore. And tons of gore.
There you go. So yeah, it's a little bit of everything from this. So,
yeah.
A couple things in there I want to kind of pick apart a little bit. So you mentioned EC Comics and those kind of classics. I think the horror anthology is really like a pillar of horror comics. Was that something you've always been interested in? Did you grow up reading those?
I don't think I grew up reading Tales from the Crypt. I mean, I knew the Tales from the Crypt TV series. And did you ever find, like, I remember Scholastic having Tales from the Crypt books that weren't actually the comics. They were like the Crypt Keeper maybe introducing jokes or something.
I don't remember that. I remember the TV show, and I remember watching it like at an age where I definitely should not have been watching it. And it was on HBO, but I feel like I also saw it like on Fox or something.
Yeah, it would syndicate, I think. And so there was edited versions, and I remember, it'd be on like 10 o'clock or something on Fox, and always watching the beginning and being like young enough that knowing that jump scare at the end was coming, but being frightened by it. So yeah, I guess I've always been into as long as I've been kind of aware of Tales from the Crypt and the anthology collection stuff, I've been into that. I like the short stories. Many of these stories were originally in different comics. There's a anthology I submit to called Doublethink. So a good number of those were in that originally. The werewolf stories were originally in an anthology my friends and I put together just called Werewolf. But the title one, Land of Many Monsters, is original to this collection. And also I think King of the Hill hasn't been, which is one of the dinosaur comics, hasn't been published before.
Yeah, the dinosaur stuff was a nice surprise, because it was like, oh, this is, one, cool, because like you draw some awesome dinosaurs, but then two, I'm like,
Thanks.
I wasn't expecting this. Like, all right, you have, the kind of creature from the Black Lagoon-ish, and it's, like you said before, werewolves, Frankenstein's monsters, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, cool, dinosaurs! Because like, what guy doesn't love dinosaurs? Like, it's such like
that's the reaction I want, is people just be like, dinosaurs. Like, I just love dinosaurs.
And it's something that like I feel like everyone gets at an early age. Like I have a 2.5-year-old, and he loves dinosaurs. Like I don't like his frame of reference to it is limited to like the 10 or so T-shirts that he has that have dinosaurs on them. But he knows dinosaurs are cool. Dinosaurs go roar, and like that's it. Like that's more than enough for us.
I think I just read an article recently about like how young a kid is when they start their dinosaur phase, is like an indication of their intelligence later on. So you might have a smart kid there if he's dinosaurs that early.
I had heard once that like the fascination that kids have with dinosaurs is like it's like the first thing that they become aware of that's like bigger than their parents. And I'm like, like when I first like started like wrapping my head around it, I'm like, oh, okay, like that kind of makes sense. Like, I mean, but then again, like, then I'm like, all right, well, what about like cars? Like, no, the kids love cars too. Like, it's just like, you get like little Matchbox cars or whatever, but like they see a car or like a big truck or something like that, and they gravitate towards that too. And I'm like, yeah, it's a size thing maybe that they're just really into like understanding. Oh, okay, I love my parents. My parents are the biggest thing in my life, but then here's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and now this is the biggest thing in my life.
So much bigger than parents. I think it's also like it's kind of an early form of mastery, is what this article I was reading was saying. There's like, a kid can learn like 10 dinosaur names, and they're complicated and stuff, and their parents might not even know those dinosaur names, right? Because like, we all remember T-Rex and stuff, but do you know Carnotaurus or something like that? So it's an early form of like learning fun learning, I guess.
Yeah,
mastery.
When you know all of those, like, I guess you're like the weird / cool kid at parties when you could throw out. I feel like Ankylosaurus has like made a jump into pop culture, because like when I was growing up, it was T-Rex, Stegosaurus, Triceratops, and then Brontosaurus, which like came in and out because of the whole. Like, is it a real dinosaur or is it not? But now Ankylosaurus is all of a sudden, I'm like, yeah, the badass one with the club tail, definitely.
yeah, Ankylosaurus is dope. There was just that recent discovery of the Ankylosaurus that was like almost perfectly preserved and looks like a statue, and it's like the most detailed fossil we've seen yet, and it's like the closest we've gotten to like, wow, this is actually what a dinosaur looks like. I follow this podcast called I Know Dino, and so it keeps me up on my dinosaur knowledge. It's just a fun hobby to still have as an adult. It's like I at a certain point realized like I always wanted to either be a cartoonist or a paleontologist, and I realized like I don't have that science bone in my body, but I can still keep up with it a little.
That's fine. You can draw the hell out of them, so I think that's pretty cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I love drawing them. Yeah. And I tried to do I don't want to draw humans interacting with dinosaurs. I just want, like, if I'm drawing dinosaurs, I just want dinosaurs. I just want them to be fighting each other.
None of that Flintstones nonsense, all right? You're going for authenticity here.
As authentic as my poor non-paleontology brain can do. So dinosaurs that were roughly in the same time period, with give or take like a million years.
Now, being that you do have you kind of cover a little bit of everything in this. This might be like trying to ask a parent to choose from their kids, but like, do you have a favorite monster that like one that's like I was like, if you're stuck on a desert island and you can only have one monster, what would it be?
That's a good question. I mean, I've always liked the Gill Man, the creature. That's the story that starts out my book is is Drought, which is like I drew that during the California drought, and it was my kind of take on that there's still water wasters out there, and like the creature is going to take its revenge on you for that. So yeah, I've always liked the creature. I mean, there's no Godzilla in this book, but I always loved Godzilla. He was an early monster for me. Yeah, I don't know which one's my favorite.
That's okay. Like I said, I feel like it can be tough to ask, like, because this book is packed full of monsters, so it's like, all right, you kind of cover all the bases, but if there was one that's like, oh, this is the favorite, or rather, I can ask, was there one that you're like, oh, I should have included this and didn't get a chance to?
At first I forgot to include the Invisible Man, but then I was like, maybe I didn't. Maybe he's there.
He's in every story.
He's always there.
That is a really good one. That was so I have two kids, but like one year, what my wife was like, we got to do like a Halloween costume that's like everything, like we'll have a family Halloween costume, and I said like, I mean, I guess we could kind of do The Incredibles. She's like, well, there's 5 people. I said, yeah, but one of them is a girl who's invisible, so we could just say that she's there all the time.
Yeah,
it works out that way. Yeah,
she's there. Yeah.
Now, you write and draw all of these. Now, I'm always curious from the writer-artist perspective, like, what is your process like? Do you write a script out? Do you start with thumbnails? Do you just dive in and start making stuff?
I definitely don't script, but I have things pretty tightly thumbnailed before I go to the finished drawings. But a lot of it starts with sketches in my sketchbook and a lot of notes and stuff. And a lot of the, some stories come like character first, and some are in the Land of Many Monsters, I think so the main character is called Furiosa Frankenstein, and I think right after I saw Mad Max Fury Road, I drew that character for the first time, where I was like, she's the bride of Frankenstein combined with Furiosa, basically.
I was going to ask, when did that one come out? Like,
yeah, I let that sit for a couple years before I did a comic about it. But some of them are, start out personal, like, there's the second to last one in the anthology, Whispers in the Woods, which, by the way, just won Best Graphic Novel 2018 at the Silver Screen Fest.
Is that the one from what is the publisher that does that? Is yes,
American Gothic Press. Yes. Yeah, which is a division of Famous Monsters. Yeah, so that might get expanded into a book. It's too early to talk about it because I haven't. But I think that will probably get expanded into a full book. But that one came, like, the monster aspect of that. So that one originally came from, my brother was actually homeless at the time, and it's just a lot of my fears about how he was surviving and stuff. And it's about teenagers in the woods accidentally hurting a homeless guy who might be a vampire. And then I was also listening to a lot of cryptozoology stuff on YouTube at the time. So, there's aspects of that where it's like the answer to a lot of crypto mysteries is always like, well, people saw an owl and humans don't really know what owls look like is basically what a lot of crypto stuff comes down to. So I wanted to play with that. So it's like something that in the shadows could look like an owl, but in reality is something insane. So that was a weird hodgepodge combination of personal and monster interests that formed that weird little 10-pager.
That kind of stuff tends to make for some really, like, cool, interesting horror stuff, because it's like, well, is that a monster, or were they seeing stuff? Because, yeah, if you talk about it, like, well, it was a monster, or it's like a homeless man, like, and they killed somebody, like, all right, you either killed a monster and good on you, or you murdered somebody. Like, that's a very different type of story.
Yeah, and I always, even if it's I always sympathize with the monster, right? Like, that's another thing I try to do with my monsters and stuff is, like, what's their life like outside of just running and killing people? Like, if a monster is an organism, like, what's their daily life? How do they function and stuff? And it's, to me, I feel like they're usually interrupted by the kids instead of, like, going out to seeking them out to eat them.
They're probably, in the middle of doing something, or it's like, oh, I was just doing my laundry, and you came in here, and now I gotta terrorize you or something, like.
And yes, my laundry is human skin, but.
Come on.
There's nobody you know.
It's like it's no weirder than the kinds of things you kids wear nowadays. I just picture like the annoyed older monster is what my mind immediately went to.
What is that? Are high waists back in?
Oh, I never understood fashion. The lamentations of the subway monster or whatever.
Yeah. I fit in the 80s. Oh.
I'm just waiting for bell bottoms to come back again. See, this writes itself here.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. I just had a weird encounter at work actually that I wrote down. I actually didn't have it, but we have a field behind our work, and somebody came in. Somebody was walking around, and they got stopped. It was like, "This is private property. You can't be here." And like, "Just let me change my pants." What is that story?
Yeah, there's so many questions there. Like, what did he bring his pants there? Did he find it? Did he lose his pants and he found them there? Like, there's a lot to unpack there.
Where are the extra pants? Like, yeah. So I don't know. I wrote that down and I was like, that's going to go into a story at some point.
Yeah, but it's like, maybe that's just like that could just be his kink, you know? It's like, no, I'm just gonna go someplace and take my pants off. Like,
I just like to change my pants behind office buildings.
That's what I'm into, man. It's a really weird fetish, but you know, don't judge me. Everyone's got their kink.
Yeah.
yeah. There's so much to that guy that we have to find out. Well, you know, it's funny. I told this story like today at work, but there was. Well, I think one of the reasons why I'm like hesitant to meet new people is like a few years ago, I was outside during lunch. I'm sitting here reading a book. This guy comes up and starts chatting me up, and I'm like, oh, cool. Like, you seem like a nice, normal individual. We exchanged contact information, and like the very next day, he sends me porn, and I'm like, whoa. This friendship escalated really quickly. Like, you know, I don't know that I'm at that level with like people that I've known for years, and all of a sudden it's like the next day, check this out. I'm like, whoa, bud, like, let's pump the brakes here a little bit.
Was this person you met in the porn, or was it just? I can tell this is the kind of stuff you're into.
I think it was just more about like, I don't know, like I thought this was cool, you know, check it out. What do you think about this one? And it was like so just like. It was, I think it started with like, hey man, can you can you check out a video right now? And I'm like, nah, like I got a meeting or something. And then like, like I'm thinking like he's gonna send me like, you know, here's some like funny YouTube video I found, or you know, something like that.
Right.
And then it ended up being completely different. Like, was not prepared for that.
Well, I'm sure that was a friendship test for him that you failed.
I'm not ready for that. So yeah, we're gonna cut that one off. We're gonna look for look elsewhere. We parted ways after that.
Yeah, that was from 0 to 60.
And then again, like, what if that's that guy's thing? You know, like, what if he's just like, I'm gonna go and talk to random people during lunch, and then I'm gonna send them porn and just see what happens. Roll the dice.
Yeah. I like to think about how freaked out they get.
All right, so going back to your book, we got off track a little bit there. So this is a collection of short stories, and all of them are short stories, and all of them like really get like you get like a nice twist in a lot of them. Like, is that like I feel like writing short stories is a particular kind of challenge. That like you have to tell a story that has a beginning, middle, and an end in like 10 pages or less. How do you kind of approach something like that? Or do you come at it from like the character first, the monster first, the premise?
Yeah, again, it depends on the story. There's one early in the book, Magic in the Moonshine, that, I mean, the thing I came up with that one first was I wanted to draw in a Popeye style. So that was all premise first. It was like Popeye style with moonshine and witches and you know, it was just about fitting as much stuff in as I could. So sometimes that kind of thing comes up where it's just like, I'm just trying to visually create something. But yeah, I like short stories because like you get in and you get out. A lot of these I don't even bother to name the characters, which that's always a struggle for me. Characters are either going to have like a really insane name like Furiosa Frankenstein, or they're just going to straight up not have a name.
Well, I guess in some, like, I've gone back and forth on that because, like, and sometimes it's like, well, a character, you need to care about the character, you need to understand that, but, like, sometimes, like, you don't even need all that much because, I mean, well, look at the dinosaur stories, like, you get an idea, okay, this is the underdog kind of dinosaur, this is the big, scary dinosaur, they're gonna fight. They don't even talk.
Yeah.
And, but same thing, like, the one you referenced, the Whisper in the Woods. Whisper in the Woods.
Whisper, yeah.
Like, I don't need to know these, like, two teenagers, like, backstory or whatever. I don't need to know how they got to here. It's like you kind of established who they are in, like, the first or second panel, and that, like, yeah, they're walking through the woods at night and they're drinking. Like, you got it. Like, that's all you need.
Yeah, and, like, for them, I gave them a kind of distinct visual style where I felt like if you were in high school and saw them, you'd know who they were, right? Like, they're the alternative kids. They're, like... Not the
popular kids. They're not the jocks or the cheerleaders or anything. Yeah, they're the outsiders.
So yeah. I mean, if I'm doing longer stories, I definitely work out my characters more. But this is all shorts. What happened was I from 2006 to like 2010, I was working on a graphic novel, and then after that, I was like, I'm done with long form stories. I'm tired of it. I just want to create shorts. Yeah. There's a thing of like, you create a set, you create a setup. You got to do the setup in like 1 or 2 pages, and then you live in that world for like 3 or 4 pages, and then you like build in a twist. Right. And like the twist has to come somewhat organically. It can't just be like, and then they were on another planet the whole time. It has to be. And sometimes the twist is just something simple, like in the dinosaur comic, Horns, it's like that the meat eater is not the bully, is not the one looking for a fight. It's just going to a watering hole. And it's the like Styracosaurus, which is kind of like a Triceratops type, is the bully, is the one causing trouble. So like that's the twist in that one. It's just like it's not the meat eater who's at fault.
Now, everything in here too is black and white. Is that is that like a budgetary thing, or is that just is that like the style that you prefer?
It's definitely both. Yeah, I mean, I'll always instinctively go to black and white. And part of that is like I come from the like mini comics world, so like I'm used to self-publishing my comics and that you do on the cheap, But Drought was originally, which is the Gilman story, was originally published with Spot Reds for blood and such. So I couldn't afford to do that because with the book, or my publisher couldn't. Argued against it because with the book you can't just do like 3 colored pages. It'd have to be the full book, which would like triple the price of the comic. So
yeah, it's tough.
But I'm very comfortable in black and white. Like I lean into it. I have to color stuff for my day job, so part of that is.
Well, that's also that's a big deal then if you're able to do artwork for a day job too. Like that's helpful. Mm-hmm. Helps pay those bills.
Yeah, I'm in a lucky position. I work for Peanuts actually for the Schultz studio. So yeah, it's a nice job I happened into. So it's a lot of just licensing art and like approval of that on that, and but it's still cool.
Yeah, I mean like everyone knows Snoopy, like it's such like a huge deal, and like and that guy is still making money or his estate is, and he died like years ago. So it's like
2000.
He kept on going there, but it's one of the most recognizable characters or series of characters out there.
Yeah, we've got great brand recognition to use non-creative terms.
Now, you mentioned that you had done a graphic novel, and then you kind of you didn't want to do that anymore. What put you off of the longer form content?
It's such a commitment, especially if it's not how you're making your living. Because it was a 5-year project to write and draw this thing. It's called Amelia, a Monsters and Girls story. It's also available on Amazon. But yeah, I went through this long process. I was publishing it in individual issues. It took me about 5 years, and then nothing really happened with it after I was done with it. I self-published it, and the collection looks good and everything. But when you're doing a long project like that, it can be kind of creatively exhausting. These short stories are kind of a lot more work because you have to go through the process of creating new characters every time. You can't like walk back into these old characters, but you're done with the story before you're bored with it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, right, like worst case, that's the one beauty about anthologies in general is that like, well, if there's one story that like doesn't really work for you, like there's another one in just a few pages, and you just kind of keep going.
That's right. Yeah, and this, I think, one thing that's weird I've discovered from selling at conventions and stuff is a lot of people don't pick up anthologies these days. But I feel like this book's a little different than a normal anthology because it's all still me. So there's that coherence that is still created. So
yeah, I have this like love-hate relationship when it comes to horror anthologies because like I love that they exist. I love that you can kind of get this wide variety of stories, but I found that like when I have to review them, they're all like kind of the same idea. It's like there were some good stories, there were some okay stories. Overall, it's good. But the ones that I found are the best are the ones that are really guided by like one voice. So not to discount the ones that are out there that kind of show like here's a bunch of stories about werewolves. Like that's awesome. We could do that. But when it's like you have one person that's kind of telling all those different stories and you kind of get that one idea, it's like, all right, this is cool. Or even better if it's all in one world. When you look at something like Dirk Manning's Nightmare World or Neil Gibson's Twisted Dark, like they're done by all these different artists and stuff, but it's like one kind of like overall voice that's guiding that whole thing. It's all set in the same world, and it's like, oh, okay, I got a lot out of this. I feel like there's more to it than just well, this was 10 stories that was collected. But that's the kind of thing that I think I got through here, because it's like, all right, here's a monster story, and it's like they're all in your own style and your own kind of voice there that I think comes through. So it's like, and because the variety is so much that it's like dinosaur, werewolf, other thing, and it's like, oh man, like this is just like you can kind of bang through this, and it's like there is kind of something for any kind of monster that you like here.
Yeah, and I like the last story in it, The Land of Many Monsters. Part of my prep for that was for a good 3 months at work, I was just drawing a dinosaur, a monster a day on sticky pads. That was just my like, I'm going to take 10 minutes every day and just draw with no thought process, just like start drawing a monster. And so about half of those ended up in the like crazy cave of just totally packed with monsters. Was just like, all right, I have like, 2 inches to fill. I'm going to like flip through my sticky pad and see if I haven't drawn one of these guys yet. Ooh, that, like, cause I just love drawing monsters. That's like, if I have a piece of paper in front of me, I'm probably going to draw either a new monster or like a Ninja Turtle or something.
Well, they're a form of monster. I mean, like, when you get down to it, I mean, it's a giant mutant turtle. Like, that's freaking terrifying.
Yeah, I actually have this whole argument about, how like people in previous the generations before us could be like, oh, I was a monster kid growing up. And that term doesn't really exist for us. Like nobody really defined what we liked as kids as like, oh, you're a monster kid. But I'd say if you were into Gremlins as a kid, if you were into the Ninja Turtles, you were a monster kid. That label just wasn't
it's a different type now. Because like monsters became more mainstream between that and like the Ghostbusters. Like you're dealing with the paranormal. Like,
oh yeah, especially if you were into the Ghostbusters cartoon, which had like just wacky monster like quote unquote ghosts every single.
You have to use that term pretty loosely. It's like I don't know what like. They fought like the Sandman. They fought all this kind of like they fought the ghosts from the Charles Dickens Christmas Carol. Like, all right, like go for it.
Yeah, it's like some of these things I don't think ever could possibly have been living things. They're just like weird big nosed creatures and stuff. It's almost like
what was
Lovecraftian.
That? Yeah, it's like if that was a person, like what happened in death that they transformed into like. Well, now I collect garbage, and I just and this is what I do in the afterlife,
Yeah.
Looking back on it now, it's like, man, that was kind of fucked up. Like, what did they do there?
Yeah, it's a weird series.
But then you look at like what J. Michael Straczynski was like a head writer on that show for years, like, and it's like, yeah, it's like,
was he?
Dude, dude was a noted comic book writer, and made Babylon 5 and stuff, and it's like, okay, like, you go back to the real Ghostbusters, like, good on you, man. That's some good nerd cred.
That's cool. Yeah. Oh yeah. There's tons of things like Babylon 5 or like the Star Trek series is where if you were into those and were like into the aliens that were weird, like those are monsters. They just weren't called monsters, right?
It's so much you can just kind of like dissect. I feel like there's like a not a hierarchy, but something like that where it's like you can kind of graph like at what level of monster kid are you? Like, did you collect Garbage Pail Kids cards? You're the the filthy monster. If you were the Ghostbusters, it's this. You know.
Yeah, and it's kind of maybe it's that like because I think we're about the same age. Like when we were growing up, horror movies were explicitly not for kids. Like, it was slashers were ruling the day and stuff. But like, monsters gotta be somewhere. Horror has to be somewhere. So they creeped into the mainstream. They gave the kids who were into that kind of thing a little like a direction into it, right? Without being like the weird kid who watched Hellraiser and like, you know. I always felt bad for the kid who was like 5 and had watched Hellraiser. I was like,
what happened to you? Like, but yeah, I mean, but I remember like I don't know how old I was, but I watched like all the Friday the 13th movies at like way too early of an age, and I feel like it was like, yeah, okay, like you want to watch, all right, whatever, go ahead, grab that. I think I only got in trouble when one of my friend's dads watched, it was Return of the Living Dead, and there was some scene where like this woman's like dancing around topless doing like a striptease.
Yeah,
and it was like. Yeah.
Trash.
And it was like, whoa, all right, we're going to have to take a closer look at the stuff you're renting. And it's like, thanks a lot, Ed. You know, like, you messed it up for all of us.
Yeah. Oh, man, there's always the one kid whose parents are too strict.
Well, I don't even think it was that. Like, I think it was just like his dad was like, what'd you rent? All right, sure, I'm going to check this out, too. And then it was like, whoa, you kids are all watching this? What the fuck? Like... So that got a little that got turned off a little bit. But meanwhile, like reading, like whatever. Yeah, if you're gonna read Stephen King's It when you're like in 6th grade, go for it. Like, all right, forget about all the weird stuff that's in that book. Like, he's reading. That's so great.
Yeah, I'm just proud of the reading.
But that's what I feel like. I feel like a lot of like horror kids got into that because it was like, I don't know, I was reading and like I just got it. I just started reading all that stuff, whether it was Goosebumps or anything. But like they would just dive into that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The kid who you get to read Stephen King.
Now,
yeah.
You mentioned you're usually like, if I guess left to your own devices, you're gonna draw a monster. Was that always the case for you growing up? Like,
yeah, I think pretty much. I always liked monsters. I was definitely so into the Ninja Turtles. I drew them for years. I'd say I didn't really recognize myself as, or didn't label myself as like, just as like horror being my genre, or being like exclusively my genre. Cause I was always into like, I'd watch horror movies in middle school and stuff and, read horror comics and stuff. But it wasn't until I was in college and then just after college where, I started to get into like David Lynch and David Cronenberg. And I actually started, with a group of other people, became a horror host we did a live horror show on Saturdays at midnight at our local video store called Atomic Age Cinema. And that's really like when I think I found myself as like, horror, this is my thing. It's cool because like I was the only cartoonist of that bunch, but like the guys who I did that with, they're now making movies in Indiana. Like this was back in Indiana, where I went to college was Indiana. And they're still there and they're making movies professionally. They have a company called like Bandit Motion, I want to say, but they did, Found, Headless, Harvest Lake. Their latest movie, Space Babes from Outer Space, just won like the Mr. Skin Award for most nudity in a single scene.
What an accomplishment.
So I'm proud of those guys. I'm very proud of those guys that they have stuck with their guns.
Yeah.
They're still doing what they love.
That's great. Like you just kind of like it came to you where it's like, oh, my people, and all that lined up.
Yeah, that is definitely the thing where you find your horror people. And I mean, I feel like I've listened to a couple episodes of your podcast. I know this comes up a lot, but it's like horror people are great people. They are genuinely nice people. Like, I think it's because we're getting all that like shit out of our system.
Yeah.
We're like what's our deepest, darkest, like most horrible thought? Oh, I'm going to put that on paper. Yeah. I'm going to put that in a movie. And we're free to be nice people. It's the dudes who make like teen romance movies that are like, oh man, they're holding their dark side in. They are like going to get caught in 10 years doing something terrible.
I'm looking at you, Jason Biggs. I know it. There's a dark side to you.
Jason Biggs is a messed up guy. Oh man, I just saw this movie. I was at the Silver Scream Fest a couple weeks ago. this story is going to be terrible because I forgot the name of the movie, but it was kind of the American version of What We Are in the Shadows, and it one of the main stars was the other guy from American Pie, the kid from League of Their, or not a League of Their Own, that baseball movie.
Baseball movie. What? Not Stifler. What?
No, it's the guy who was dating Tara Reid.
Yeah, I know his face. I don't know anything else about him. Like I can't picture his name at all. He's one of those. Oh yeah, that guy.
It was him, and the bully from 10 Things I Hate About You was a vampire. And so they're still working. The movie was okay. I can't remember the name, but it was basically the American version of. It's like the documentary crew is coming in to film how vampires really live.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess it works sometimes. Like, go ahead and give that one a whirl, man. But yeah, I'm continually amazed by how welcoming horror fans are. Like, just in general, like they'll give something a shot, or like I don't know that I've ever been called like a retard in any of the comments or the reviews I write, which like I wrote like on my own personal blog, which like no one went to, but like I would put up something, I'm like, oh, this is what I thought about Captain America, and like within like 2 hours, someone just swooped in and was like, you're retarded, you're wrong, and I'm like, what? How did you even get here? Like, were you just looking for like? Yeah.
They were just hunting. They were just like, I have a Google alert for Captain America. It goes off constantly.
I gotta tell.
And I go and fight.
I gotta go fight all these idiots who like, oh, they don't know anything.
Because this is a thing I love.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like,
yeah, it's interesting. And maybe it's like superheroes, you only have like 10 superheroes, right? But horror just expands and expands. And, you start off into monsters and stuff, and then before you know it, you're like into like weird cult cinema, like you're watching Jodorowsky movies, and like you just get to like expand. Like, and superhero comics don't expand, they contract.
Yeah, it's all second act. Like, that's the thing. It's like, they're never gonna get to the end. They're not, Batman's never gonna actually win his war on crime. He's gonna keep going. Like, sure, there could be cool adventures from between now and then, but like, we're never gonna see that end. He's never gonna hang up the cowl.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of outsiders to horror kind of see horror that way also, but they're literally just thinking about the slashers. They're just thinking about Jason and Freddy and stuff. And I mean, I love those too. They're fun. But like, that's just the surface, man. Like, we got a whole fucking ocean full of monsters.
That's a really good point. And that, like, okay, the killer always comes back. He's not dead. And that's certainly an element to it. But the one of the benefits of this genre is how versatile it can be. So you can have that over there, and then you can have some weird body horror stuff, and then horror for kids, and everything else in between.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that it's the nature of what horror is like, it's about trying to find something either that frightens you, or like a better word for me than frighten is just disturbs. Something, you're trying to find something in your soul that disturbs you, and instead of running away from it, instead of being like, I'll never tell a story about that, being like, all right, I've got to like tear this out of my chest and like look at it and show it to other people. Right?
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism to an extent too, because it's like, well, this is how I'm going to deal with this thing that scares the shit out of me, is I'm going to turn it into a story, and then maybe I won't be scared about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And that shit, like, my comic is a bunch of monsters and stuff, but it's also the last one in it, The Land of Many Monsters. And this isn't the only comic I'm going to write about it, obviously, but I wrote that pretty soon after my mom died. And that's where that, like, I have a recurring line in it that's from Son of Frankenstein, I think. In Son of Frankenstein, it's like, his mother was the lightning. But I have the Furiosa Frankenstein being like, my mother was the lightning. This and this and this. It's like her mantra through it. And that was just definitely me being like, I got to think about the fact that like my mom's still with me in some way. Right. So it's like, obviously I'm going to do something else about my mom at some point, but this was just the like, I'm not going to do a comic right now that doesn't touch on that. Right.
It's beautiful, man. That's great.
Thanks.
See, like, and that's the kind of stuff you could do in a horror thing. Yeah, you could do like a sappy, drama or something like that, but you could also do something with a bunch of monsters kicking ass, and that's an entirely other.
Yeah, and I want to do something that makes me feel certain ways, but I don't necessarily want to bum everybody out and be like, here's a 200-page novel about like Alzheimer's,
death,
you know?
Yeah.
I'm not ready to do that right now. But not that there is some good. There are some really good comics about that. There's Brian Fees had a comic called My Mom's Cancer, which was about his mom's cancer. So I'm not bashing that kind of stuff. It's good. I just got it out in a different way.
One's with monsters, one's with I'm not familiar with that other book, so I can't really comment too much on that one. Now, have you mainly self-published your stuff? It sounds like you have some experience with that field.
Yeah, mostly with my mini comics and stuff, I self-publish. This book came out through WK Press, who this was their first comic book they've put together, or full comic book. They mostly do monster magazines and movie magazines. So they were really cool. The editor, Tim Paxton, I met at like FantaCon in Albany, New York, like way long ago. I was tabling with Steve Bissett in like maybe 2010 and stuff. And so since then, I've done a lot of illustrations for their monster magazine. And I just really like those guys. So they're the only like people I brought this book to. I was like looking for, I knew I didn't want to self-publish this if I could, but they were like the first and only people I brought it to, because I trust them, and they were also like really understanding. Like, one of the things that happened during the production of this is I live in Northern California right now. So I was there during the big Sonoma County fires. So I like evacuated my house with my inked cover for this, but I hadn't scanned it in yet. So like while I was like staying with my cousins, I like went to Kinko's to scan it in and had to color it on my old laptop. Like, they were understanding about like, I'm in survival mode, but I also need to finish this book.
Well, at least you were taking care of that, and not just be like, I don't know, man, there's a fire, deal with it. Like that, like you took steps to show like, all right, I'm still gonna work on this to make sure it gets done. I think that stands out.
Yeah, I was out of contact with everybody for like 2 days. I didn't have power, and I didn't know we had no cell service. So it was like, I don't know what to do. So, but once things got figured out, and like the fire kept going, but the danger had passed. We knew the fire was more contained. But that was nuts. Last year was insane, right?
Well, that's just one of the crazy ass things that happened last year, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I'm looking through here if there's anything else I want to go over, but this has been awesome, man. This is a lot of fun. And like I said, like I really dug your book because it is a little bit of everything in the different types of monsters in it. So, and I could see like you like monsters, like that kind of thing comes out definitely in the book, where it's like, oh, like this guy thought about this. It wasn't just like, yeah, all right, I guess I'll make a werewolf story, like that's what's selling these days. I'm going to make a werewolf story. Kids are into werewolves.
Yeah. No, it all comes from the heart. My heart's just filled with monsters.
The Denis St. story. My heart is full of monsters.
My heart is filled with monsters. Oh, that sounds great. That's I do this podcast with my friends called Buffy Virgin, where it's like all my high school friends, and one of them has never seen Buffy, so we force them to watch Buffy. But that's like every week I talk about the monster that week, and I'm like, it comes from this movie, and like, I'm always like the guy who's like, my monster corner. Like,
well, it's such like a tried and true piece of the horror genre, dating back to like the Universal monsters of old and everything. So yeah, like it's I guess you could go into like the whole metaphor thing of it, of like, oh well, werewolves are like you're uncomfortable in your own skin or this or that. But I'm like, at the same time, it's like, yeah, but werewolves are just fucking awesome. Like, it's cool just to like read a werewolf story sometimes.
And I'm into the monster as metaphor thing, but I also think you gotta like not be like locked into the metaphor. Like the metaphor can change. Like for me, a werewolf is, this, but for you, a werewolf can be like about like female power or something. Like Yeah, you got to not be like, oh, if you're into vampires, it's because you're gay. Like,
oh man, thanks a lot, Dracula.
You like vampires?
You messed me up for life, Dracula. My whole world is a lie.
Vampires. Sorry, I don't know why I just said that. But yeah, you can approach a monster on like a number of different levels. It could be like the organic level or the metaphor level, and there's no wrong way to do it as long as you're doing it well. And if you're doing it poorly, then there's just no right way to do it. You're just a fuck up.
There we go. What a way to close out this show. So Dennis, what's the best places for folks to find you online?
If you want to take a look at my portfolio, I'm DenisComics.com. That's Dennis with one N, comics with an X. I'm at Denis Comics, same spelling on Twitter. I'm on, I still have a Tumblr I keep active called Monsters and Girls. If you just search my name, and you can find my comic, The Land of Many Monsters and Many More Monster Tales, on Amazon, or through a link on my website, which will lead you to the Amazon. I'm on Instagram at Denis St Comics, because I wanted my last name in there a little.
Is it
so that's where you can
Saint,
find me.
as in like all spelled out, or ST?
It's all spelled out. Only on Instagram. I don't know why I didn't keep it consistent, but I did. And then you can find my podcast, Buffy Virgin, is buffyvirgin.com. It's on iTunes and wherever else you find podcasts. We actually record the video and put it on YouTube. So if you want to watch us talk, which is super exciting, we're on YouTube. And I do another podcast I just forgot about called Two Dummies and a Dumb Movie, where another cartoonist I know, David Yoder, and I get drunk and watch a movie together on Netflix, and we usually forget to talk about the movie.
That sounds fun, though.
Yeah, it's like hanging out.
Man, you're staying busy with all this. You got a lot going on here, man.
Yeah, I like to stay busy. I don't like to let the emptiness in.
That sounded a little dark.
I'm doing a new dinosaur comic right now for people who follow me on Patreon.
Oh, a little bit of that too. Where do you got Patreon?
I'm a Patreon, just Denis St. John. If you subscribe at the $1 level, you can see all my Buffy drawings and all my dinosaur comics. I should have a new book coming out at some point. It's a little early to talk about, but look for something at some point.
There we go. So yeah, well, I'm sure we'll update folks when something like that comes up, certainly. But Dennis, again, thank you. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about all this stuff. But again, Land of Many Monsters available now at Amazon. So definitely check it out. Like I said, monster for everybody in this, and dinosaurs. So like, what more do you need in life? But yeah, that's it then for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson with my guest, Denis St. John. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.